Well, welcome everyone to another one of the C.A.R.B Hall of Fame video interviews, and today we have Bob Thoman with us. And Bob, let me first say it's a pleasure to be able to congratulate you on being inducted into the C.A.R.B Hall of Fame.
Thank you. It's a very much an honor to be part of this, and to be inducted with some guys that I looked up to means a lot to me.
Yeah, I know Roy Hibbert and Tom Corbin were two of those, and the guys were kind of ending their careers as you were starting yours. And
that's true.
For all of you guys, especially here in Central Missouri, to be able to go in together, why, that's got to be a lot of fun.
It is. It really is. It's something I didn't expect for sure.
Yeah.
And so I'm very much pleased to be part of it, and I was part of the group from out in the country racing, and of course we were familiar with the people in Kansas City that raced the Howards, and I don't want to start naming all of them, but there was a lot of good racers up there that we raced against off and on. But
I'm kind of glad to see the Hall of Fame spread their radius a little bit out further, because I think pretty much it has been Kansas City area, although Kosiski got inducted here, I think, a year or so ago. Of course, he's from, Lincoln, I believe, if I remember right. But like I say, nice for the area to get bigger and include more people. But it sounds like that your dad kind of got this racing spirit started in you by taking you and your brothers to the fair.
He did, unintentionally. He did.
Yeah.
He took us down there because he was kind of a fan, and he didn't know it was going to plant the bug in me that it did, and so I just got all excited about the racing part, and I wanted to do it as soon as I could, and he was quick to tell me as long as I was planting my feet under his table, I was not going to race myself. Period. So, but ironically, when I became a little more successful later on after I got married, he was one of my biggest fans.
One of the biggest fans, yeah. I was going to say, it's pretty hard to not get involved and want to be a part of it, especially when there's a lot of winning going on. And it sounds like there was some winning going on here.
Well, it was after a while. There were some real lean years early on.
Yeah. Did either one of your brothers get involved in the racing?
No.
Either with you or on their own?
No, they didn't. Either one of them. It just didn't grow in them like it did in me.
Just like that competitive spirit, I guess.
Well, I guess so.
Yeah.
I have one brother that loves golf game, and one brother that loves fishing, hunting.
Yeah.
I turned to racing.
But not racing. Still at 16, you're still kind of a fan. You really haven't gotten into the driving part.
That's right.
But you start attending Marshall, and of course this is when you really start seeing Roy and Tom doing their thing out there on the track. But like I say, just still 16 years old, but just a race fan still.
That's true. There was a lot of guys that were my heroes back then, but Roy was one of the main ones, and Tom, and also Roy's brother Russell was racing then, and Torch Alshire, and Dean, the D7 car. Can't think of his name. Anyway, there were quite a few guys that I really looked up to.
Yeah. At 26, you finally do get this chance, though, to get into a race car, we'll call it, but it's a figure-8 car. And what kind of car was that, and how did that kind of come about?
Well, it was like a 50 Ford, an old two-door coupe, I think, and
flathead.
Yes, sure it was. And I had a buddy that ran a filling station and wanted to advertise it on that car and run it, so he and another guy put it together, and they took it to the track, and really neither one of them wanted to drive once it got down to the nitty-gritty, and so they figured that I'd be a guy that would try it. So
you had that look, I guess.
I don't know what it was.
You do this for about a half a year, and you're kind of starting to get just a little excited because, one, it's not fast enough, plus you keep seeing these guys out on the oval track doing their thing, and you want to move on. So what do you step up to next?
What they call the B modified then, and it didn't have injectors or anything. You had to run a carburetor and gasoline instead of alcohol. So anyway, that's where we started. I'm not sure any other restrictions, but that was the main thing.
Okay, so those first few years, though, you're saying that it was kind of lean. It was a real learning experience, I'm sure.
It was. It really was. And I think Tom Corbin, because he lived closer to us, was gave us a few hints of what to do to make the car go a little better. And so it was very much a learning experience.
Yeah. According to the bio and stuff that I've read on you, it says that in 1970 you get your first feature win at California, Missouri. Now, was that in this car that we're talking about right now?
No. It was in, it was in, well, you know, it might have been in this same car.
Still a B mod?
It still had a carburetor on it. Yeah, still before fuel injection.
Okay.
But it was an old, it was an Edmunds car, I think, that I bought from Gary Scott.
Oh, okay, okay. That was the first win that you finally got. Okay. So, in 1968, how did we get ahead to 88? In 1968, you start running the B mod, and then you're moving on in now to what we would call the fuel injection, or what would probably be a super modified. Is that correct?
Probably right.
Yeah. Now, by this time, that's got to be the top class that they're running, is the super modified. So you're up to full speed now. I mean, you're running with the big boys.
Trying to.
So how did that go? I mean, was that a pretty big transition? I mean, it had to be a lot faster.
It was a lot faster, a lot more horsepower, a lot more torque out of the turns, and so you just had to get used to feathering the throttle a little bit if you needed to. But it was again a learning experience, but it came around a little quicker this time because I was used to the competition, and that was one of the first things you needed.
Okay, now what about suspension on these? Before we get into the sprint cars, we'll talk about torsion bars and stuff like that later on, but what about the suspension on this car?
Well, the earlier ones we had a spring front. It was an old spring out of a car across the
leaf spring.
Leaf spring across the front axle, and I believe we had torsion bars in the rear. And then a little later on, they went to what they call a 4-bar car. Went to torsion all the way around.
Yeah, okay. In 72, you buy an Edmunds car from Gary Scott, and this probably is the very first sprint car that you do get into. Now, most of this racing that you're doing at this time too is like Jeff City and Marshall and places like that. I think you told me, what was it, Jeff City on Saturday, Marshall ran on Sunday night. So 2 nights a week. Sounds like you're starting to get into it pretty heavy, and then again you're making another switch, jumping into the sprint cars. Was that a big transition?
It was, yeah. It was. It just took some time to get used to. First of all, the tougher competition and the more horsepower and the way the cars handled different, actually better. But it came pretty quick.
Were the sprint cars then? You're saying, the way I'm hearing this, they were a little bit easier to set up than these older cars. You had more adjustments.
Oh yeah, you had more adjustments with the torsion bars versus the springs in the front. You just didn't have a whole lot you could do there.
One thing I meant to ask you, when you were transitioning this B mod, or from the B mod into the super modified, how hard was that fuel injection to deal with? Because man, some of that early fuel injection stuff was kind of tough, wasn't it? And dust and dirt too, because if I remember right, they just ran them tubes, had no air cleaner or anything.
That's true. We had that, and I was fortunate back even in those days to have a motorman. I didn't have to deal with that too much. I had a motorman that built. He was an old drag racer. His name was Bob Qualls, and a good friend of mine. We worked together at Leeds plant, and so he built my motors. He was a good guy to do that, and he could build some pretty good horsepower, and so we had a lot of fun, and he took care of the motors. So
you that was off your list. You were just behind the wheel.
That's true.
In 79, we're jumping ahead here, pretty good jump. In 79, you win the second half of Roadrunner 100 at Empire Speedway in Farmington. You go on to win this last half of this race for 3 times. I don't know, was it 3 times in a row or just 3 times?
I don't know that it was in a row. I really kind of doubt it, but I know I won it, parts of it over a few years, and at that time, I think Danny, my son, was helping me a lot, and I had a good crew. Had some guys that was on my crew that were young, late teens, early 20s, and they were dedicated to racing. Let me tell you, they were hard-working guys. Some of them are here at the banquet with me, and I'd like to name them all, but as sure as I started, I would leave somebody out, and I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. Names are not one of my big things anymore. I can't do that. But one of the questions I really wanted to ask you was, it seems kind of odd that you win the last half of this thing 3 times. What was the deal with the first part, or were you just a late bloomer?
Well, I don't know. What'd you say? Oh, I was in one night. I know on one of them what the deal was, because I had a motor issue or something with my car right off the bat. So I got in another guy's car. He'd been wanting me to drive his car for a while. His name was Junior Guile, and he didn't. We'd ask him where different settings were on the car.
Yeah.
Found out that he didn't really have it set up anywhere close to like I wanted. So in the first 50 lapper, I was mainly just trying to not run over everybody and just doing the best I could.
Yeah.
We didn't qualify real well, but we got up to I don't know, like 3rd or so on the first one, and then we inverted the field and lined up again. And by that time, the crew, the guys had the car where it was really running well, and we won the second one.
And you were up front. Started up front on that one with the inversion.
Well, I started actually 3rd from last.
Oh, really?
They inverted the whole field.
Oh my gosh! Ran through the whole field to win that. Golly, that's got to be tough. What, the regular starting field, like 24, or did they start more than that?
Probably 22 to 24. Yeah.
I was going to say a 50 lapper, because back in those days, like I was talking with Roy, I said it had to be kind of hard to get some of them cars to go 50 laps, didn't it? It's just to last that long.
Yeah, that's probably true, but it was amazing. They went together good, and it was we didn't have power steering back in those days.
Oh my gosh!
And it was a little tougher to last that long behind the wheel.
Well, maybe it was your conditioning from working down there at Leeds.
I don't know about that, but I was younger and an old farm boy that could handle the strain.
You tell me that at Capitol Speedway in Jeff City, you had probably what might be, or you consider, your biggest or finest win that you had in that, excuse me, the promoter had brought in some big name drivers. Tell us just a little bit about that and who those guys were.
Well, I don't have the names, but there were 2 guys from St. Louis that rented this track to run a big sprint show there. And they wanted to get some big names in there, and they had Sammy Swindell, they had Jimmy Seals from California, Jimmy Boyd from California was there. 2 of my local heroes at that time, Bill Lutz and Gary Scott, were there. Tough guys to beat.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And so we ran that race and wound up winning the thing. And I started on the pole. I remember that Sammy Swindell was on the outside, and I know that at that particular night, the outside is where you had to be in it. So I went back to 4th or 5th before I finally got to where I needed to be. And then, and I can't remember all the details about how I got to the front, but fortunately I got there. And I remember pulling into the winner's circle, and the promoter, the first thing he asked me was, "Who are you?"
Who are you and where are you from, boy?
Yeah, and I said, well, I'm just a local racer from up the road here a few miles, and I was 100 miles away was where I lived, and then he had all these other names in there. So yeah, he was probably a little disappointed that a local guy did it, but I was sure proud to be there.
Man, that sounds like a lot of fun, Bob. That's a pretty neat deal. That had to make you feel special, because let's face it, how many guys, drivers can actually say they beat Swindell and Sills, and like you say, Oots and Gary Scott. Man.
And one other thing, I bought that car from Gary Scott.
Oh yeah.
And he had sold me that car, a bolt-on roll cage, and he had gone to a new car that he had helped another guy design in Nebraska, I think, and they brought it back. And so as I was pulling out of the racetrack, Gary pulled up beside me and said, "I want my race car back." That was kind of fun. I mean, it was just a highlight, one of the highlights.
Yeah, and you and Gary were good friends.
We were very good friends.
Have been for a long time. Yeah. During the '83 season, you are the last track champion at Marshall before that track closes.
I'm sure, well, you told me it was your favorite track, but I'm sure everyone here in Central Missouri felt kind of bad when that track shut the doors.
Terrible. Yeah, it was a heartbreaking loss to me, and I know a lot of other people too. I still get sad every time I drive by that area and know it's either a bean field or a housing project or something there, and that old racetrack is special to me.
And let's face it, man, it was a proving ground for a lot of guys that went on to have really good careers.
That's true.
That started here in the Central Missouri, including Bob Thoman. Okay. You sort of branch out a little bit during this, I'm going to say late 80s, early 90s. We're kind of talking in time frames here. In that you start driving for the Hearst brothers, and the funny thing about this is it takes you to Indiana to race quite a bit. And I saw a picture the other day, and it'll be on the video here at the end, of you racing at Eldora. But you know, that was just one of the tracks. I think you mentioned Lawrenceburg and Hofstadt.
Hofstadt.
I always have trouble pronouncing
Hofstadt is out by Evansville, Indiana. One of my favorite tracks in Indiana.
Oh, really? Okay.
And Lawrenceburg's another track that I used to really enjoy going to. There were 4 or 5 tracks out there that we hit quite a bit because Dave, the owner of the car, had his favorite tracks, and he'd take me around. But Hofstadt had to be on Sunday night so I could get back to work in Kansas City on Monday morning.
Oh, that's crazy, man. What is it, a 10-hour drive or something? Like you said, races weren't over till 11?
If the races, it was about a 7-hour drive, and I mean, if you were running hard.
I was going to say, race car driver, he wouldn't be running soft.
Well, I had to get to work. One good thing, I was driving for Dave, so I didn't have to help load the car or anything. Once the race was over, we could jump in the car and head this way. But I had time to come in the house and take a shower and go to work. And
I presume this included wife, children?
Wife, for sure, and we probably had kids riding along at the time too, part of the time. Yeah.
Now, also talking about this Indiana racing, was most of this, because I know USAC is so big back there, was most of that non-wing, or was it a combination? Or
it was kind of a combination, but there was an awful lot of non-wing. I really enjoyed that, and still do, the non-wing racing. But that's where I got a lot of non-wing roots back there.
Yeah. Can you think? I'm putting you on the spot here. Can you think of a win that you had back there in particular? I mean, if you can't, that's okay, but I'm like I say, I'm kind of throwing this at you late.
There was one in Illinois at Mount Vernon.
Oh, I've been there.
Mount Vernon. I won one in Jeff Weeds' car there. That was a wing show, I believe. And Dave's car, I really enjoyed running it. I ran good in it, but there was so much non-wing competition out there.
Oh, man,
there'd be
that had to be tough.
40 or 50 cars at about every race you went to.
Yeah, well, and you were talking some of the biggest names in racing in that time too. Kinzer.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, go down the list.
Yeah, I ever saw a time, and I've got a video of this because a lot of people won't probably believe it, but I have a video of Jeff Gordon when he was a kid come out there and run at Hofstadt, and he was like 15 or 16 years old, and he won the thing, and I was mad because this kid beat me, and it turned out to be Jeff Gordon. I think I ran either second or third. And Jeff won it. I remember when I took my son out with me one time, he said, "Dad, you got to come and look at this seat in this race car. It looked like you might be able to get one leg down in it." He was a small guy.
He was. I seen him win Billville. I know what you're talking about. The year he won that.
Yeah.
Quite a deal. We won't talk a lot about this because I don't think it was your favorite thing to do. But you did race some asphalt. Now, what kind of car was that and where at?
It was a Chevelle late model. Had a big, had a 454 motor in it, or 427. I'm not sure what, but it was a big block, a lot of horsepower. Ran it on asphalt at I-70. Tom Bierman was the owner, and had Feld Chevrolet, I think, as a sponsor.
Oh, really?
Anyway, it was kind of a good ride, but I couldn't get over the setting down in that big thing, and once you started around the track, a lot of that sheet metal in there was rattling around, and I wasn't used to all that, and it just seemed like a big bulky car. But once you got on the track, there was some fun in it, but I couldn't get the dirt tracking out of my mind. You know, I crashed it out of one race out of two that I drove it. I crashed it, and so I think we were both kind of glad that partnership ended.
That had to be exact opposite of what you'd been doing, because it definitely takes a different driving style.
It does.
And boy, for an old dirt track guy, that had to be a handful, I'm sure.
It was.
Because I know I-70 every year used to have at the end of the season, I think, where they'd let the dirt guys come in there and race their modifieds and stuff, and it was laughable is all I'm going to say, because they were not spinning out, but the rear end was hanging out a lot. I mean, not like what you'd normally see in asphalt racing. You do set out a couple of years in between two bouts with cancer, and you're having trouble with some blood clots, but you make your way through that, and you have a crew member of yours that is also suffering cancer and is really about to die, Greg Houston. Houston. And he makes a request to you that he'd like to see you in the race car one more time.
He'd like to see that car run again, is what he told me, and he was in bad shape and knew he wasn't going to be around too much longer. And so Gary Beck, who was my motor man, has been for years. In fact, he's in the audience here tonight. Just a good, loyal friend, and was building my motors, and he had my motor down there, and he had it sitting there ready to race for a couple of years. And so when Greg asked me that, we called Gary, and Danny and I went down and got the motor, brought it back, put it in the car, and we were going to run it on Saturday night, and Greg had died before we could ever get it on the racetrack, which was a sad situation, but we decided to run it the next week in his memory. So we did that, and turned out that got my blood circulating again. Because we got out there the first time in the car after about 4 years. Was 21 cars were there, and I wound up running second. So
I have to tell you what Buzz Castor told me when I talked to him about getting back into racing, because he was out of it. He said, I thought I had the cure. But he said it didn't work. He said, when I got back in that race car, it all started again. So it's kind of the same deal with you.
Same deal with me, and my son's the same way. He's been out of racing for 17 years and got back in, and it's probably all my fault, but he got the bug again too, so he's running now.
You did get a second place finish that night. I mean, how much better can you get it? I mean, it ain't winning, but it's the next best.
It is, and it's been pointed out to me a few times that the winner was 17 years old and I was 71. So we just reversed the numbers there, but it was a thrill.
And good way to pay respects to Greg.
Yes,
good deal. At 71, you do return to racing in a sprint car, wing sprint, and you win a feature.
Non-wing.
I'm sorry. Okay, my bad. Non-wing sprint car, and you're racing, and you win a feature at Lebanon, Missouri. Boy, I saw the picture a while ago. You had to be just crazy.
Yeah, it was a special moment for sure. To get back in the winner's circle. Been for years since I've been there. So,
without a doubt, that's got to be really neat. And of course, you continued to race. I think you did have a serious accident in 14 and had to sit out for a while. Is that correct? The right year?
I think 14 is the right year, and it wasn't. I mean, it was a bad accident, but I didn't have any really broken bones or anything except the concussion affected me longer than I really expected, and I'm not sure I'm still out of it. I'm probably going to get in the car once this year just to see if the bug comes back and whether I can have the reflexes to do it yet.
Yeah, exactly.
My son and I are trying to run a car for him most of the time, so I'm trying to pay him back for all the help he gave me early in my racing career.
Well, that kind of brings me up to the next question. I know through 45 years of racing, there have got to be probably more names than you can actually list or talk about. But could you tell us of just a few of the people that you're really thankful for and that have helped you over the years?
Well, one of the first ones was Brown's Body Shop, that's Brian Brown's grandpa, who ran a body shop in Higginsville, and he did all the paint work and the lettering work on my car. I know the paint work and I think most of the lettering work on the car the first few years I drove. Jeff Kirchhoff and the Noggin brothers are sponsoring me yet to this day with some help financially and a good fan support. He's Gary Beck, who's with me tonight, and he's from down in Farmington, to show you what a good friend he's turned out to be. He has come all the way up to this banquet just because I was being inducted into this Hall of Fame, and a better friend I couldn't have in racing. He's been instrumental. My family, my wife Brenda's. Chuck Amati told her one time she was the best racing wife he ever met, and that's saying quite a bit for the one-armed bandit to say that. So, and I believe he was absolutely right there. And my daughters, Karen and Terry, and they supported this. They made sacrifices along the way to support me in this. And like I say, Danny, I couldn't ask for a guy any better than him as far as knowing the car and being the kind of the brains behind the whole operation as far as it's set up and everything. I was especially proud of him and the crew, the whole crew, part of which are here tonight. When we went to the State Fair and ran second, I went to Riverside that night and won, back to the fair the next day and ran second, and then crashed at Marshall the following night. But that was two different extremes in racetrack services when you go from a fair, which is a half-mile dry slick, to Riverside, which is a short tacky track. Different setups completely, and they had the car ready for both of them. I was especially proud of that.
Is that the one, excuse me for interrupting, but is that the one where you did 4 races in 2 days?
That's right.
Oh, gosh.
That's right. Yeah, and another guy that I can't leave off of this, and he's here tonight too, is Todd Rechterman. He's another sponsor that, in fact, the best sponsor I've ever had. And a good friend. I've known him over a lot of years, and he's Cars Plus Credit. That's who's on my race car and on my trailer, and so he deserves all the good publicity I can give him.
Yeah, quite a list. You know, like I say, they talk about taking a village to raise a child. It takes more than that to support and carry on a racing career, especially for 45 years. Once again, Bob.
Could I mention one other guy?
Go right ahead.
Okay, Ben Harleman, who's inducted into the same Hall of Fame a few years ago. I drove his midget 2 different years. One year was a good year, one year was not so good, but I need to thank him. He's such a racer at heart. He drove for a lot of years and was very successful, and he just wanted to play with his midget, and so I was privileged to drive for him. And
was that the Chili Bowl picture I saw?
Yes.
Okay. 76.
Yeah, number 76. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Had an Evan Rude motor in it.
Well, see, I thought that's the car that had the Evan Rude. I wasn't sure. I saw that several times at the Chili Bowl myself. It might have been you. Once again, Bob, let me congratulate you on being inducted into the C.A.R.B Hall of Fame for 2016. Like I say, it's just got to be a great feeling.
It is. It's a great honor, and thank you very much.
Okay.